Mara Vance stepped off the stagecoach into a town that looked like it had already died once. Dust hung in the air like old grudges. The ranch she'd traveled 3 weeks to reach sat broken on the horizon, roof sagging, fence posts leaning like drunkards. And the man who'd promised her a life? He was bleeding into the dirt of his own barn, half dead and silent as a grave. She had two choices: turn around with nothing, or stay and build something out of ruin. Mara chose the harder road. She always did. If you want to see how far a woman can go when the world tells her to quit, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The stagecoach lurched to a stop, throwing Mara forward against the worn leather seat. She caught herself with one hand and pushed back, blinking dust from her eyes. Through the window, Dry Hollow spread out like a promise someone forgot to keep. Low buildings with sun-bleached paint, a mercantile with boards over one window. 3 horses tied outside a saloon that looked too tired to pour a proper drink. Mara climbed down without waiting for the driver's help. Her boots hit the dirt and she steadied herself, one hand smoothing her skirt. The fabric was practical, dark gray, already stained from travel. She wasn't here to impress anyone. "This is it?" she asked. The driver didn't look at her. He was already hauling her trunk down, letting it thud onto the ground like it owed him money. "Dry Hollow, end of the line, miss." "Where's the Hale Ranch?" He pointed east without turning his head. 5 miles. Follow the road till it stops trying." She waited for more. He didn't give it. He climbed back onto his bench, snapped the reins, and the stagecoach rolled away in a cloud of dust that tasted like regret. Mara stood there, alone in the center of town, watching the stage disappear. A few faces appeared in windows. A man leaning in a doorway turned away the moment she looked at him. She picked up her trunk, heavier than it should have been, packed with everything she owned, and started walking. The road east was barely a road, more like a suggestion worn into the dirt by people who'd given up halfway through. The sun hammered down, turning the sky white at the edges. Mara's shoulders ached after the first mile. After the second, she stopped counting. When the ranch finally came into view, her stomach dropped. The house was small, wood-framed, leaning slightly to one side like it had taken a punch and never recovered. The roof sagged in the middle. One shutter hung crooked. The fence around the property was half collapsed, posts rotting where they stood. Beyond it, she could see a barn, bigger than the house, surprisingly intact, and a stretch of empty pasture that ran all the way to a line of low hills. No smoke from the chimney, no horse in the corral, no sign of life anywhere. Mara set down her trunk and wiped the back of her hand across her forehead. She'd come all this way on a letter. 3 careful pages written in a firm hand, offering partnership, land, a future. Rowan Hale had written like a man who knew what he wanted. He'd sounded steady, capable. This place looked like it had been beaten into the ground. She picked up her trunk again and walked to the house. The front door was unlocked. It swung open with a creak that made her teeth ache. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the smell of old smoke and something sour she couldn't place. The main room was small: table, 2 chairs, a cold stove, dishes stacked in a basin, unwashed, a coat thrown over the back of a chair. "Rowan Hale?" Her voice cut through the stillness. Nothing. She moved through the house quickly. 1 bedroom, bed unmade, clothes in a pile on the floor. A second room, smaller, empty except for a broken chair. No one here. Mara stepped back outside, shading her eyes against the sun. The barn stood about 50 yards away, doors half open. She walked toward it, her heartbeat picking up for reasons she couldn't name. The barn was dim inside, shafts of light cutting through gaps in the walls. The smell hit her first, blood and sweat and something metallic. Then she saw him. A man lay in the far corner, sprawled on a pile of old blankets. His shirt was torn open, stained dark across his ribs. One arm hung limp at his side. His face was turned away from her, jaw tight even in sleep. Mara crossed the space in 3 strides and dropped to her knees beside him. She pressed 2 fingers to his throat. Pulse. Faint, but there. His skin was hot, fever burning under the surface. "Rowan Hale," she said again, sharper this time. His eyes cracked open, dark, unfocused. He stared at her like she was something his mind had conjured up and couldn't quite trust. "You're real," he said. His voice was rough, scraped raw. "I'm real. What happened to you?" He tried to sit up, failed. His breath hitched and he sank back down, eyes closing. "Trouble." I can see that. How bad? Bad enough. She pulled back the edge of his shirt. The wound was ugly, a gash along his ribs, stitched clumsily with what looked like fishing line. The skin around it was inflamed, red streaks crawling outward. Infection. You do this yourself? She asked. Didn't have a choice. Mara rocked back on her heels, studying him. He was younger than she'd expected. Maybe 30, maybe less. Dark hair matted with sweat. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones. He looked like a man who'd been carved out of something hard and left to weather. When did this happen? 3 days ago, maybe 4. Lost track. You've been lying here for 4 days? Didn't feel like dancing. She almost smiled, almost. Who did this? His eyes opened again, locking onto hers. For a moment he didn't answer. Then, men who want me gone. Why? Because I'm still here. Mara stood, brushing dirt off her skirt. She looked around the barn. Empty stalls, broken tools, a wagon with one wheel missing. Everything about this place screamed failure. She should walk away, catch the next stage out, find somewhere that wasn't falling apart at the seams. But she'd spent the last 3 years running, chasing rumors of work, scraping together pennies, sleeping in boarding houses that smelled like mildew and broken promises. She'd answered Rowan's letter because it was the first thing in a long time that sounded like a way forward. She looked down at him. He was watching her, waiting. I came here for a partnership, she said. I know. You didn't mention you were dying. Wasn't planning on it. Can you stand? He hesitated. Then he gritted his teeth and pushed himself up onto one elbow. His face went white, but he didn't stop. Mara grabbed his arm and hauled him the rest of the way. He swayed, unsteady, but he stayed upright. You've got infection setting in, she said. You need a doctor. Closest one's in Ridgewood, 30 miles. Then we'll go to Ridgewood. Can't. No horse, no money. Mara stared at him. You're telling me you're just going to sit here and die? I'm telling you I don't have options. She let go of his arm. He leaned heavily against the barn wall, breathing hard. She watched him for a long moment, then turned and walked outside. The sun was starting to dip, painting the sky in shades of rust and amber. The land stretched out in every direction, dry, stubborn, unforgiving. She could feel the weight of it pressing down on her shoulders. She went back to the house, found the stove, and started a fire. It took longer than it should have. The wood was damp, the kindling scarce, but eventually flames caught and held. She filled a pot with water from the pump outside and set it to boil. When she returned to the barn, Rowan hadn't moved. He was still leaning against the wall, eyes half closed. Come on, she said. Where? The house. I'm not patching you up in a barn. He didn't argue. He let her pull his arm over her shoulders, and together they stumbled across the yard. By the time they reached the house, both of them were breathing hard. She lowered him into one of the chairs by the table. He slumped forward, head in his hands. Stay awake, she said, trying. She pulled the boiling water off the stove and poured it into a basin, found a clean rag, or as clean as anything in this house could be, and soaked it in the hot water. When she pressed it to his wound, he hissed through his teeth but didn't pull away. This is going to hurt, she said. Already does. She worked in silence, cleaning the wound as best she could. The stitches were holding barely, but the infection had taken root. She needed salve, proper bandages, medicine she didn't have. You've got whiskey? She asked. He nodded toward a cabinet. She found the bottle, half empty, cheap stuff that smelled like turpentine. She poured some onto the rag and pressed it to the wound. Rowan's whole body went rigid. He gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. Breathe, Mara said. He did, slow and shaking. After a moment, the tension eased. She bandaged him with strips torn from an old shirt she found in the bedroom. When she was done, she stepped back and studied her work. It wasn't good, but it was better than what he'd had before. You'll live, she said. For now. Thanks. Don't thank me yet. She poured herself a cup of water and sat down across from him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. You should leave, Rowan said finally. Probably. I can't pay you. Can't offer you anything. You already did. In your letter. That was before. Before what? Before you got stabbed? Before your ranch started falling apart? She leaned forward. I didn't come here because I thought it'd be easy. I came here because I didn't have anywhere else to go. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. You're serious? I don't joke about survival. You don't know what you're getting into. Then tell me. He exhaled slowly, leaning back in the chair. There's a man, calls himself Garrick. He buys land, cheap, usually from people who can't hold it anymore. He's been circling this place for months, sent men to make offers. When I didn't sell, they got persuasive. They did this to you? 3 of them. Caught me out by the north fence. Told me I had 1 week to reconsider. When's the week up? 2 days ago. Mara set down her cup. So they'll be back. Yeah. How many men does he have? 6? Maybe 7. Hard to say. And you've got what? You and a half-dead horse? No horse. Sold it last month for seed money. She almost laughed. Almost. You're in a bad spot. I know. And you still want me to leave? He met her eyes. There was something in his gaze. Pride, maybe, or stubbornness. I don't want you to die for a piece of land that isn't yours. It could be, she said. That's what your letter said. Partnership, equal share. That was when I thought I had something to offer. You do. You've got this place, and you've got me. You just got here. I know. He shook his head, but there was something like relief in his expression. You're either brave or crazy. Maybe both. Outside, the sun finally dropped below the horizon. The room filled with shadows, the fire in the stove the only light. Mara stood and moved to the window, looking out at the dark shapes of the barn and the fence and the empty land beyond. I'm staying, she said, at least until you can stand without falling over. After that, we'll see. Rowan didn't answer, but when she glanced back, he was watching her with something that might have been gratitude. The next morning, Mara woke before dawn. She dressed quickly, pulling on her oldest work dress and tying her hair back. Rowan was still asleep in the bedroom. She'd insisted he take the bed while she made do with blankets on the floor. His breathing was steadier now, the fever starting to break. She went outside into the cold, gray light. The air tasted clean, sharp. She walked the property slowly, taking stock. The fence was worse than she'd thought. Whole sections were down, wire snapped, posts rotting at the base. The barn had good bones but needed repairs. New boards, fresh nails, a door that actually closed. The house was salvageable, barely. The land itself was dry, but not dead. With water and work, it could grow something. She found a shovel leaning against the barn and started digging post holes. By the time the sun was fully up, she'd replaced 3 fence posts and strung new wire between them. Her hands were blistered, her back aching, but the fence stood. Rowan appeared in the doorway of the house, leaning heavily on the frame. "What are you doing?" he called. "Fixing your fence. You don't have to." "Yes, I do." He started to argue, then stopped. He watched her work for a moment, then slowly made his way across the yard. "You shouldn't be out here," Mara said when he reached her. "Neither should you. I'm not the one with a hole in my ribs. I can help. You can sit down before you pass out." He didn't sit, but he didn't argue either. He just stood there, watching her work, and after a while he said, "You're good at this. I've done it before." "Where?" "Everywhere." She didn't offer more, and he didn't push. They worked in silence, her digging, him handing her tools when she needed them. The sun climbed higher, turning the air hot and dry. Around midday, they heard hoofbeats. Mara straightened, shading her eyes. 2 riders appeared on the road, moving slowly toward the ranch. They were too far away to make out faces, but close enough to see intent. "Get inside," Rowan said. "Who are they?" "Garrick's men." Mara didn't move. She set down the shovel and wiped her hands on her skirt. "How do you know?" "Because they always come in pairs." The riders reached the edge of the property and stopped. One of them, a tall man with a scar running down his left cheek, leaned forward in his saddle. "Rowan Hale," he called. "We need to talk." Rowan stepped forward, his hand pressed to his side. "We talked already." "That was a week ago. Things change. Not for me." The scarred man's gaze shifted to Mara. He looked her up and down, slow and deliberate. "Who's this?" "None of your concern," Rowan said. "Everything on this land is our concern." Mara stepped forward, putting herself between Rowan and the riders. "This is private property. You're not welcome here. The scarred man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. You've got spirit. I'll give you that. But spirit doesn't keep a roof over your head. Neither does trespassing. His smile faded. Garrick's a patient man, but his patience has limits. You've got 3 days to reconsider his offer. After that, we stop asking nicely. We're not selling, Mara said. We? That's right. The second rider, younger and quieter, shifted in his saddle. The scarred man stared at Mara for a long moment, then turned his horse around. 3 days, he said. Then they rode off, dust trailing behind them. Mara watched until they disappeared over the ridge. When she turned back, Rowan was staring at her. You shouldn't have done that, he said. Done what? Challenged them. They were on our land. It's not your fight. Yes, Mara said, her voice hard. It is. Rowan opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He looked at her, really looked, and something in his expression shifted. You're not leaving, are you? He asked. No. Even if it gets worse? Especially then. He nodded slowly. All right. All right what? All right, partner. Mara felt something loosen in her chest. She picked up the shovel and went back to work. The days that followed were hard. Mara worked from sunup to sundown, repairing what she could, making lists of what she couldn't. Rowan recovered slowly, his strength returning in increments. By the end of the first week, he could walk without wincing. By the second, he was working beside her. They didn't talk much. There wasn't time. But they fell into a rhythm, her fixing the fence and him patching the barn roof, her hauling water, him clearing brush. The work was brutal, relentless, but the ranch started to look less like a graveyard. On the 9th day, Mara went into town. Dry Hollow looked the same as it had when she'd arrived, tired, wary, half dead. She tied Rowan's borrowed horse outside the mercantile and stepped inside. The shopkeeper, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, looked up from his ledger. His eyes narrowed when he saw her. You're the woman staying out at the Hale place, he said. I am. Word travels. Apparently. He set down his pen. What do you need? Nails. Lumber. Salve if you've got it. I've got it. You paying cash? Mara pulled a small pouch from her pocket and set it on the counter. The shopkeeper opened it, counted the coins, then nodded. This'll cover the nails and the salve. Lumber's extra. How much extra? He named a price that made her jaw tighten. She didn't have it. Not even close. I'll take the nails and the salve, she said. Suit yourself. She gathered her supplies and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. Who's Garrick? She asked. The shopkeeper's face went carefully blank. Don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. He didn't answer, but his silence told her everything she needed to know. Mara rode back to the ranch with the supplies tied to the saddle. When she arrived, Rowan was standing by the barn, staring at something on the ground. She dismounted and walked over. Her stomach dropped. One of the fence posts she'd replaced had been pulled up and thrown into the dirt. The wire was cut clean through. And nailed to the post was a piece of paper with 2 words scrawled across it. Last chance. Rowan looked at her. They came while you were gone. Did you see them? No, but they left a message. Mara stared at the post, fury building in her chest. She'd worked for days on that fence. Days. They think we'll break, she said. Most people do. We're not most people. Rowan picked up the post and examined it. No, he said quietly. I guess we're not. That night, they sat at the table in the house, a single lamp burning between them. Rowan had spread out a crude map of the property, marking the vulnerable points, the north fence, the road, the barn. They'll come at night, he said. That's how they work. Hit fast, disappear before anyone can respond. How many? 3, maybe 4? Can we hold them off? Depends on what they bring. Mara leaned back in her chair. We need help. There's no help, not here. Then we make do. Rowan looked at her, something like admiration in his eyes. You don't give up, do you? Not when I've got something worth fighting for. And this place is worth it? She didn't answer right away. She looked around the small, drafty room, The cracked walls, the uneven floor, the stove that barely kept the cold out. It wasn't much, but it was hers, theirs. Yes, she said. It is. What? 2 nights later, Mara woke to the sound of breaking glass. She was on her feet in seconds, heart pounding. Rowan was already moving, grabbing the rifle from beside the door. Stay here, he said. Like hell. They stepped outside together. The barn was on fire. Flames licked up the side of the structure, bright and hungry against the dark. Smoke poured into the sky, thick and choking. Mara ran toward it, Rowan right behind her. Water, she shouted. They worked fast, hauling buckets from the pump, throwing them onto the flames. The fire fought back, spreading faster than they could stop it. By the time they got it under control, half the barn was gone. Mara stood in the wreckage, chest heaving, hands black with soot. Rowan leaned against the remains of a support beam, his face grim. They're not playing anymore, he said. Neither are we. Mara, no. She turned to face him, her voice sharp. We're not running. We're not selling. We're not giving them what they want. Then what do we do? She looked at the smoldering barn, then back at him. We fight. Rowan stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, he said. We fight. The next morning, as Mara sifted through the ashes of the barn, she heard something. A sound. Faint, almost lost beneath the creak of settling wood. A whimper. She froze, listening. There it was again. She moved toward the back corner of the barn where the fire hadn't reached. There, beneath a pile of old feed sacks, something stirred. Mara pulled back the sacks and stopped. A girl, small, filthy, with wild eyes and tangled hair. She couldn't have been more than 10 or 11. She stared at Mara like a trapped animal, ready to bolt. It's all right, Mara said softly. I'm not going to hurt you. The girl didn't move. Mara crouched down slowly, keeping her hands visible. What's your name? No answer. Are you hungry? The girl's eyes flicked toward the house, then back to Mara. She didn't speak, but her body language screamed, yes. Come on, Mara said. Let's get you something to eat. She stood and stepped back, giving the girl space. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the girl crawled out from under the sacks. She was small, painfully thin, her clothes little more than rags. Her feet were bare and bleeding. Mara held out her hand. The girl stared at it, then, hesitantly, took it. Together they walked toward the house. Rowan was waiting on the porch. When he saw the girl, his eyes widened. Who? I don't know, Mara said. I found her in the barn. The girl flinched at the sound of Rowan's voice. Mara squeezed her hand gently. It's all right, she said again. You're safe now. The girl didn't look convinced, but she didn't run. Mara led her inside, sat her down at the table, and put together a plate of bread and dried meat. The girl ate like she hadn't seen food in days. Maybe she hadn't. When she was done, she looked up at Mara with wide, wary eyes. What's your name? Mara asked again. The girl opened her mouth, closed it. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, Lark. Lark? Mara repeated. That's a good name. The girl didn't respond, but something in her expression softened, just a little. Rowan stood in the doorway, watching. Where did she come from? I don't know, but she's staying. She's staying. Rowan looked at the girl, then at Mara. He sighed. All right, he said, she stays. And just like that, the fight wasn't just about land anymore. It was about family. Lark didn't speak for 3 days. She moved through the house like a shadow, flinching at sudden sounds, watching the door like something might come through it at any moment. Mara gave her space, left food on the table, and didn't push. The girl ate when no one was looking and slept curled up in the corner of the main room, refusing the blankets Mara offered. On the 4th morning, Mara found her standing by the window, staring out at the burned remains of the barn. You can go outside if you want, Mara said. Lark turned, eyes wide. It's safe here, Mara continued, or as safe as anywhere. The girl looked back at the window, then at Mara. She didn't move. Mara sat down at the table and started mending a torn shirt. After a long silence, Lark crossed the room and sat down across from her. She picked up a scrap of fabric and began twisting it between her fingers. Where are your parents? Mara asked. keeping her voice soft. Lark's hand stilled. Gone. Gone where? Just gone. Mara nodded slowly. She didn't press. She knew what gone meant. She'd been there herself. How long were you hiding in the barn? Lark shrugged. Don't know. Long time. Why there? Better than the cold. Mara set down her needle. You're not going back to the cold, you understand that? Lark looked at her with something like disbelief. Why? Because you're here now, and we don't leave people behind. The girl's eyes filled with something Mara couldn't quite name. She looked away quickly, back down at the fabric in her hands. Rowan came in from outside, dust on his clothes, sweat on his forehead. He'd been working on clearing the debris from the barn, salvaging what he could. When he saw Lark sitting at the table, he stopped. She talking yet? He asked. Some, Mara said. He nodded and moved to the water basin, washing his hands. Lark watched him carefully, like she was trying to decide if he was dangerous. We need to go into town, Rowan said, drying his hands on a rag. Get supplies, lumber for the barn. We don't have money for lumber, Mara said. I know, but I've got something I can trade. What? He hesitated. My father's pocket watch. It's worth something. Mara frowned. You don't have to. Yes, I do. We need that barn standing before winter hits, and we need it now. She wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Without the barn, they had nowhere to store feed, nowhere to shelter animals if they ever managed to get any. They were already hanging on by their fingernails. One more setback, and they'd lose everything. I'll come with you, Mara said. Someone should stay here. Keep an eye on things. I'm not letting you go alone. Mara, we're partners, remember? That means we don't split up when there's trouble. Rowan looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He just nodded. Mara turned to Lark. You'll be all right here for a few hours? The girl's face went pale. You're leaving? Just for a little while. We'll be back before dark. What if they come back? They won't, not in daylight. Lark didn't look convinced, but she didn't protest. Mara found a sturdy stick near the woodpile and brought it inside, setting it by the door. If anyone comes, Mara said, crouching down to Lark's level, you hide. Under the bed, in the corner, wherever you can fit. And you don't come out until you hear my voice. Understand? Lark nodded, gripping the stick like it was the only solid thing in the world. Mara and Rowan left just after noon, riding double on the horse they'd borrowed from a neighbor who owed Rowan a favor. The road to Dry Hollow was dusty and empty, the sun beating down without mercy. Mara sat behind Rowan, one arm around his waist to keep steady. She could feel the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept scanning the horizon. You think they'll try something? She asked. I think they're waiting to see what we do next. And if we don't sell? Then it gets worse. They rode in silence after that. When they reached town, Rowan tied the horse outside the mercantile and they went inside together. The shopkeeper looked up from his ledger, his expression souring the moment he saw them. Back again? He said. Need to make a trade, Rowan said. What kind of trade? Rowan pulled the pocket watch from his vest and set it on the counter. It was old, brass, with an engraved cover. The shopkeeper picked it up, turned it over in his hands, then clicked it open. The mechanism inside still ticked, steady and precise. Where'd you get this? The shopkeeper asked. It was my father's. And you're willing to part with it? I need lumber, nails, enough to rebuild a barn. The shopkeeper set the watch down and leaned back in his chair. That's a lot of lumber. It's a good watch. Maybe, but watches don't build barns. Rowan's jaw tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying this watch is worth maybe half of what you're asking for. You want the rest? You'll have to come up with cash. I don't have cash. That's why I'm trading. The shopkeeper shrugged. Then I guess you're out of luck. Mara stepped forward, her voice cold. You know what this is worth. You're just lowballing because you think we're desperate. The shopkeeper's eyes flicked to her. I'm running a business, not a charity. You're running a racket, Mara said, and everyone in this town knows it. Careful, miss, you're new here. You don't know how things work. I know how men like you work. You squeeze people until they've got nothing left, then you act like you're doing them a favor. The shopkeeper's face darkened. Get out of my store. We're not done here. Yes, you are. Rowan put a hand on Mara's arm. Let's go. No, Mara said, shaking him off. She leaned across the counter, her eyes locked on the shopkeeper. You're going to give us what we need, because if you don't, I'm going to tell everyone in this town exactly what kind of man you are. They already know. Then they'll know twice. The shopkeeper stared at her, his mouth a thin line. Finally, he sighed and picked up the watch again. Fine, he said. I'll give you the lumber, but you're not getting the nails. Deal, Mara said before Rowan could argue. The shopkeeper handed over a receipt and jerked his thumb toward the back of the store. Lumber's out back. Load it yourself. They spent the next hour hauling boards onto the wagon the shopkeeper grudgingly lent them. By the time they were done, Mara's arms ached and her hands were raw. Rowan looked worse, his face pale, the wound in his side clearly bothering him. You all right? Mara asked. Fine. You're not fine. I'll manage. They climbed onto the wagon and started back toward the ranch. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the road. Mara kept glancing over her shoulder, waiting for something to go wrong. You shouldn't have done that, Rowan said after a while. Done what? Backed him into a corner like that. He's not going to forget it. Good. Maybe next time he'll think twice before cheating people. Or maybe he'll make sure you regret it. Mara looked at him. Are you saying I should have kept my mouth shut? I'm saying you're making enemies we can't afford. We already have enemies. One more doesn't change anything. Rowan shook his head, but there was something in his expression that looked almost like respect. They were halfway home when they saw the smoke. It rose in a dark column against the sky, thick and black. Mara's stomach dropped. That's coming from the ranch, she said. Rowan snapped the reins, urging the horse faster. The wagon lurched forward, boards rattling in the back. Mara gripped the seat, her heart pounding. When they crested the ridge and saw the property, Mara's breath caught. The house was still standing, but the fence was on fire. Flames crawled along the posts, consuming the new wire she'd strung just days ago. And in the middle of the yard, 3 men sat on horseback, watching it burn. Rowan pulled the wagon to a stop and jumped down. Mara followed, her hands already reaching for the rifle under the seat. Get off my land! Rowan shouted. The man in the center, the scarred one from before, smiled. We're just admiring your handiwork. Nice fence. Shame about the fire. You did this? Prove it. Rowan started forward, but Mara caught his arm. Don't. They're destroying everything. And if you get yourself killed, they win. The scarred man's smile widened. Listen to the lady, Hale. She's got more sense than you. Mara stepped forward, rifle in hand. She didn't raise it, but the threat was clear. You've made your point, she said. Now leave. Or what? Or I start shooting. The scarred man laughed. You've got spirit, I'll give you that. But spirit doesn't stop bullets. Neither does arrogance. His smile faded. He looked at her for a long moment, then at Rowan, then back at the burning fence. 3 days, he said. That's all you've got left. After that, we stop playing nice. He turned his horse and rode off, his men following. Mara watched until they disappeared, then lowered the rifle. Rowan was already running toward the fence with a bucket. Mara dropped the rifle and grabbed another bucket, hauling water from the pump. They worked fast, throwing water onto the flames, beating them back with wet sacks. The fire fought hard, but eventually it died. When it was over, Mara stood in the middle of the scorched earth, breathing hard. Half the fence was gone. Again. This is my fault, Rowan said quietly. No, it's not. I brought you into this. I should have... Stop. Mara turned to face him. I chose to stay. I chose to fight. That's on me, not you. They're not going to stop. I know. So what do we do? Mara looked at the house, then at the burned fence, then back at Rowan. We rebuild, and we make sure they know we're not going anywhere. Rowan stared at her, then nodded slowly. All right. They went inside and found Lark huddled under the table, the stick clutched in her hands. When she saw Mara, she scrambled out and threw herself forward. Mara caught her, holding her tight. It's all right, Mara said. We're here, you're safe. Lark didn't let go. She pressed her face into Mara's shoulder and shook, silent sobs racking her small frame. Mara held her until the shaking stopped, then pulled back and looked her in the eye. You did good, Mara said. You stayed hidden. You stayed safe. That's exactly what you were supposed to do. Lark nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. That night, they ate in silence. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Lark picked at her food, glancing between Mara and Rowan like she was waiting for something to break. "We need a plan," Rowan said finally. "I know," Mara said. "They're escalating. Next time, it won't just be a fence." "I know." "So what do we do?" Mara set down her fork. "We find out who Garrick is, where he operates, what he wants. He wants the land. There's more to it than that. Men like him don't burn fences over one piece of property. There's something here he needs." "Like what?" "I don't know, but we're going to find out." Rowan frowned. "How?" "We go into town, we ask questions, we make people talk." "No one's going to talk to us. They're all too scared." "Then we find someone who isn't." The next morning, Mara rode into Dry Hollow alone. Rowan had wanted to come, but she'd insisted he stay behind to watch Lark and keep working on the barn. He'd argued, but eventually he'd given in. The town was quiet when she arrived, the streets nearly empty. She tied her horse outside the saloon and stepped inside. The place was dim, smelling of stale beer and old smoke. A few men sat at tables in the back, nursing drinks. The bartender looked up when she entered, his expression wary. "We don't serve women," he said. "I'm not here for a drink." "Then what do you want?" "Information." He snorted. "Wrong place." Mara walked to the bar and leaned against it. "I'm looking for someone who knows about Garrick." The bartender's face went blank. "Never heard of him." "You're lying. And you're leaving." One of the men at the back tables stood up and walked over. He was older, maybe 60, with a gray beard and tired eyes. He looked Mara up and down, then turned to the bartender. "I'll talk to her," he said. "Your funeral," the bartender muttered. The old man gestured to a table in the corner. Mara followed him and sat down. "You're the woman staying at the Hale place," he said. "Word really does travel. In a town this small, everything travels." He leaned back in his chair. "Name's Cutter." "Mara." "I know, and I know why you're here." "Then you know about Garrick." "Everyone knows about Garrick. They just don't talk about him." "Why not?" "Because talking gets you hurt. Or worse." Mara leaned forward. "I'm already hurt. He's burning my fences, threatening my partner, trying to push us off our land. I need to know who he is and what he wants." Cutter studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Garrick's a land buyer," he said, "but he's not buying for himself. He's working for someone bigger, someone who wants this whole valley." "Who?" "Don't know. No one does. But whoever it is, they've got money and they've got reach." "Why this valley?" "Water," Cutter said simply. "There's a creek that runs through here, feeds into the river 20 miles west. Most of the year it's just a trickle, but come spring, it's a flood. Good land, good grazing, worth a fortune if you can control it." Mara felt a chill run down her spine. "And the Hale Ranch sits right on that creek." "Part of it, yeah." "So Garrick's not going to stop?" "No, he's not." Mara sat back, her mind racing. "How many properties has he taken?" "4 in the last year. 2 more are hanging on, but they won't last." "What happened to the people who sold?" Cutter's expression darkened. "Some left. Some didn't have a choice." "Meaning?" "Meaning accidents happen. Fires, floods, bodies turn up in places they shouldn't." Mara's hands curled into fists. "And no one does anything?" "Who's going to? The sheriff's on Garrick's payroll. The town council's too scared to move. The rest of us are just trying to survive. That's not good enough." "Maybe not, but it's the truth." Mara stood. "Thank you for talking to me." Cutter grabbed her wrist. "Listen to me. You seem like a tough woman, but tough doesn't mean invincible. Garrick's got men, money, and no conscience. You push him too hard, you're going to end up dead." "Then I'll die fighting." "That's not bravery, that's suicide." Mara pulled her wrist free. "Maybe, but it's my choice." She left the saloon and rode back to the ranch, her mind churning. By the time she arrived, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Rowan was waiting on the porch. When he saw her face, he frowned. "What happened?" "I found out what Garrick wants." "And?" "It's the creek, the water. He's trying to buy up the whole valley so someone else can control it." Rowan's face went hard. "So this isn't about one ranch?" "No, it's about all of them. Then we're not just fighting for ourselves. No, we're fighting for everyone. They went inside and told Lark what they'd learned. The girl listened quietly, her eyes wide. "What are we going to do?" she asked. Mara looked at Rowan, then back at Lark. "We're going to make sure Garrick knows we're not backing down, and we're going to find out who he's working for." "How?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out." That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, her mind running through every conversation, every threat, every piece of information she'd gathered. Something wasn't adding up. Garrick was brutal, but he was also careful. He didn't strike randomly. He struck when it mattered, which meant he was watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. She sat up, pulled on her boots, and went outside. The air was cold, the stars bright overhead. She walked to the edge of the property and looked out at the dark hills beyond. Somewhere out there, Garrick was planning his next move, and Mara needed to be ready. She heard footsteps behind her and turned. Rowan stood a few feet away, his arms crossed. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "No." He walked over and stood beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. "You didn't have to stay," Rowan said finally. "When you got here and saw what a mess this place was, you could have left. No one would have blamed you." "I know. So why didn't you?" Mara thought about it. "Because I've spent my whole life running, from one bad situation to the next, always looking for something better, somewhere safer, and I'm tired of it." "This place isn't safe." "No, but it's mine, ours, and that's worth fighting for." Rowan looked at her, and something in his expression softened. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone quieter, someone who'd do what they were told." Mara smiled faintly. "Sorry to disappoint." "You didn't." They stood there in the dark, the silence stretching between them. Then Rowan spoke again, his voice quieter. "When I wrote that letter, I didn't know if anyone would answer. I figured most people would take one look at this place and run, but you didn't. You stayed, and you're still here, even after everything. Where else would I go?" "I don't know. Somewhere easier." "Easier doesn't mean better." Rowan nodded slowly. "No, I guess it doesn't." They went back inside together. Lark was asleep on the floor, curled up in a blanket. Mara covered her gently, then sat down at the table. "We need to be smarter about this," she said. "Garrick's got the numbers, the money, the power. We can't beat him head on. So what do? We make him think we're weak. We let him believe we're breaking, and when he gets confident, we hit him where it hurts. That's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous." Rowan leaned back in his chair, thinking. "You really think we can win this?" "I don't know, but I know we're not going to lose without a fight." The next few days passed in a strange, tense calm. Mara and Rowan worked on the barn, rebuilding what they could with the lumber they'd traded for. Lark helped where she could, hauling small boards, fetching tools, staying close to Mara like a shadow. The girl was changing, slowly, carefully, but it was there. She talked more now, asked questions, even smiled once or twice. Mara caught her laughing one afternoon when Rowan nearly dropped a board on his foot and cursed loud enough to scare the birds. "You think that's funny?" Rowan asked, trying to sound stern. Lark nodded, grinning. "Just wait till you're the one carrying lumber." "I'm too small." "Not for long." Mara watched them, something warm settling in her chest. This was what she'd been looking for all along. Not just land, not just survival, but something that felt like home. On the 5th day, a rider appeared on the road. Mara saw him first. She was working on the fence when she spotted the dust cloud rising in the distance. She dropped the hammer and ran to the house. "Rowan!" He came out, rifle in hand. Lark ducked behind him, her face pale. The rider came closer, and Mara realized it wasn't one of Garrick's men. It was a woman. Middle-aged, dressed in practical clothes, riding a sturdy mare. She stopped at the edge of the property and dismounted. "You Mara Vance?" she called. "Who's asking?" "My name's Eliza. I own the property 2 miles west of here." Mara walked closer, cautious. "What do you want?" "To talk, if you'll let me." Mara glanced at Rowan. He nodded. She turned back to Eliza. "All right, talk." Eliza tied her horse to the fence and walked over. She had a weathered face, sharp eyes, and hands that looked like they'd seen hard work. "I heard what you did in town," Eliza said. "Standing up to that shopkeeper. Word got around. And? And I wanted to meet the woman crazy enough to challenge Garrick's system. I'm not crazy, just stubborn. Eliza smiled faintly. Same thing out here. She looked around the property, taking in the burned fence, the half-rebuilt barn. You're holding on better than most. Barely. Barely's more than the rest of us managed. Eliza paused, then said, Garrick came after my land last year, made me an offer. When I refused, he made my life hell, burned my crops, killed my livestock. I held out for 6 months before I sold. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want to see you make the same mistake I did. Mara frowned. What mistake? Thinking you can fight him alone. I'm not alone. I've got Rowan. 2 people isn't enough. Garrick's got 6 men, maybe more, and he's got backing from someone with deep pockets. You can't win this by yourselves. So what are you suggesting? Eliza looked at her steadily. I'm suggesting you find allies. There are others like you. People who've been pushed around, who've lost land, who are tired of living in fear. If you could bring them together, you might have a chance. Why would they listen to me? Because you're the first person in a long time who stood up to Garrick and lived to tell about it. That means something. Mara considered this. It was risky, but Eliza was right. They couldn't win alone. I'll think about it, Mara said. Eliza nodded. That's all I'm asking. She turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Be careful. Garrick doesn't just go after property. He goes after people. If he thinks you're a threat, he won't stop until you're gone. I know. Do you? Because knowing and understanding are 2 different things. And out here, the difference can get you killed. Eliza mounted her horse and rode off, leaving Mara standing in the yard. Rowan walked over. What do you think? I think she's right. We need help. From who? From anyone willing to give it. That night, Mara made a list. She wrote down the names of every property owner within 10 miles, every person Eliza had mentioned, every rumor she'd heard in town. It wasn't much, but it was a start. You really think they'll help? Rowan asked. I don't know, but I have to try. Over the next week, Mara wrote out to each property on her list. Some people slammed doors in her face, others listened politely and then said no. A few, just a few, said yes. By the end of the week, she had 5 allies. It wasn't an army, but it was something. She gathered them at the ranch one evening. They sat around the table in the small house. Eliza, a young rancher named Ben, an older man called Harris, a widow named Sarah, and a quiet farmer named Tom. Lark sat in the corner watching. Thank you for coming, Mara said. We're here because we're tired of being pushed around, Eliza said. But we need to know this isn't just talk. What's your plan? Mara spread a rough map of the valley on the table. Garrick's been targeting isolated properties, picking us off one at a time. But if we work together, we can protect each other, share resources, watch each other's backs. That's defense, Harris said. What about offense? We hit him where he's vulnerable, his supply lines, his men. We make it expensive for him to keep coming after us. You're talking about a war, Sarah said quietly. I'm talking about survival. Ben leaned forward. I'm in. But we need to be smart. Garrick's got connections. If we go after him directly, he'll bring the law down on us. Then we don't go after him directly, Mara said. We make him come to us. And when he does, we're ready. They talked late into the night, hammering out details, making plans. By the time they left, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Rowan sat down beside her after everyone had gone. You did good tonight. We'll see. No, you did. You gave them something to believe in. Mara looked at him. What about you? Do you believe in this? I believe in you. The words hung in the air between them. Mara felt her chest tighten, but she didn't look away. Don't put that on me, she said quietly. I'm just making this up as I go. So is everyone else. But you're the only one willing to admit it. They sat in silence for a while. Then Rowan reached across the table and took her hand. His grip was firm, warm. We're going to win this, he said. How do you know? Because we don't have any other choice. Mara squeezed his hand, then let go. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark land beyond. Somewhere out there, Garrick was waiting, watching, planning his next move. But for the first time since she'd arrived, Mara wasn't afraid. She was ready. The first attack came 2 nights later. Mara woke to the sound of cattle screaming. She was on her feet before her eyes were fully open, grabbing the rifle beside her bed. Rowan was already moving, pulling on his boots, his face grim in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Stay with Lark," Mara said. "Like hell." "Rowan, we do this together or not at all." They ran outside. The pasture was chaos. 4 head of cattle, borrowed from Harris to help rebuild the herd, were scattered across the field, panicked and bleeding. 2 were already down, throats cut clean. The others were running blind, crashing into fences. Mara scanned the darkness. Nothing. Whoever had done this was already gone. "Sons of bitches," Rowan said, his voice shaking with rage. Mara moved toward the nearest fallen cow. The cut was precise, efficient. This wasn't random violence. This was a message. "We need to check the others," she said. They spent the next hour calming the surviving cattle, treating wounds where they could. 1 more died before dawn. By the time the sun came up, they'd lost 3 animals and most of their hope of rebuilding the herd. Lark appeared in the doorway of the house, her face pale. "Are they gone?" she asked. "For now," Mara said. "Will they come back?" "Yes." The girl's hands curled into fists. "I hate them." "I know." "Why are they doing this?" Mara looked at the dead cattle, then back at Lark. "Because they think fear works better than talking." "Does it?" "Not on us." That afternoon, Mara rode to Eliza's property. The older woman was in her garden, pulling weeds with methodical precision. When she saw Mara's face, she stood. "It happened," Eliza said. 3 cattle, last night. They hit Ben's place, too. Burned his hay stores." Mara's jaw tightened. "They're moving faster than I thought." "Garrick knows you're organizing. He's trying to break you before you get strong enough to fight back." "Then we move now, before he can hit us again." Eliza wiped dirt from her hands. "What do you have in mind?" "We find out where he keeps his men, where they sleep, where they eat, where they're vulnerable, and we make them understand what it costs to come after us." "That's dangerous talk." "Everything about this is dangerous. You said that yourself." Eliza studied her for a long moment. "You know, once you cross this line, there's no going back. I crossed that line the day I decided to stay." "All right then, I'll send word to the others. We meet tonight." They gathered at Harris's property after dark. The old man's house was bigger than most, with a barn that could hide their horses and a back room where they could talk without being seen from the road. 6 people sat around a rough wooden table. Mara stood at the head, a hand-drawn map spread out before her. "Garrick's men have been staying at the old Brenner property," she said. "It's been abandoned for 2 years, but someone saw smoke coming from the chimney last week. That's their base." "How many?" Ben asked. "Best guess, 6, maybe 7. "And you want to go after them?" Sarah's voice was tight. "I want to send a message, the same kind they've been sending us." Tom, the quiet farmer, spoke for the first time. "You're talking about killing people." "I'm talking about survival. There's a difference between defending yourself and murder." "Is there?" "They killed our cattle, burned our crops. How long before they start killing us?" The room went silent. Harris leaned back in his chair, his weathered face unreadable. "She's right," he said finally. "They're not going to stop, and if we don't hit back, we're just waiting to die." "I'm not a killer," Sarah said quietly. "Neither am I," Mara said. "But I'm not going to stand by and watch everything I've built burn to the ground." Ben looked around the table. "I say we vote. Who's in favor of going after them?" Mara raised her hand. So did Eliza, Harris, and Ben. Tom hesitated, then slowly raised his. Sarah kept her hands in her lap. "I can't be part of this." "Then don't," Mara said. "But if you're going to stay in this fight, you need to accept what it means." Sarah stood, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'll protect my land. I'll protect my family. But I won't become like them." She left without another word. The door closed behind her with a soft click. "5 of us, then," Eliza said. "5's enough," Mara replied. They spent the next 2 hours planning. The Brenner property sat in a small canyon, accessible only by a narrow trail. Defensible, but also a trap if things went wrong. They'd need to move at night, stay quiet, and strike fast. "What about the law?" Tom asked. "The sheriff's on Garrick's payroll," Mara said. "He's not going to help us." "And if he comes after us?" Then we deal with that when it happens. They agreed to move in 3 nights. That would give them time to prepare, to gather what they needed, to say whatever needed to be said in case things went bad. When the meeting ended, Rowan pulled Mara aside. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "No." "Then why are we doing it?" "Because sitting here waiting for them to kill us isn't a choice I can live with." He looked at her, his eyes searching. "You've changed since you got here." "So have you. Not like this. When you first arrived, you were looking for a way forward. Now you're looking for a fight." "Maybe that's the same thing." Rowan shook his head. "Maybe. But once this starts, it doesn't stop. You know that, right?" "I know." He reached out and touched her arm, just briefly. "Then I'm with you, whatever happens." "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do." They rode back to the ranch in silence. When they arrived, Lark was sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the dark hills. "You should be asleep," Mara said. "Couldn't." Mara sat down beside her. Rowan went inside, giving them space. "Are you scared?" Lark asked. "Yes." "But you're still going to fight them?" "Yes." "Why?" Mara thought about it. "Because if I don't, they win. And if they win, everything we've built here is gone." "What if you lose?" "Then we lose fighting. That's better than giving up." Lark pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "When I was hiding in the barn, before you found me, I heard men talking. They were standing right outside, and I didn't breathe. I just stayed still and prayed they wouldn't find me." "What were they saying?" "That this place was as good as theirs. That the man who lived here wouldn't last another week." She looked at Mara. "They were talking about Rowan." Mara's hands curled into fists. "But they were wrong," Lark continued, "because you showed up, and you didn't run. And now they're the ones who should be scared." "I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm just trying to survive." "Same thing, isn't it?" Mara looked at the girl, this fierce, broken child who'd somehow found her way into their lives. "Maybe it is." The next 2 days were spent preparing. Mara cleaned the rifles, checked ammunition, made sure every weapon they had was ready. Rowan reinforced the doors and windows, built barricades they could use if things went bad. Lark helped where she could, her small hands quick and careful. On the second night, Mara found her sitting by the stove, stitching a tear in an old coat. "Where'd you learn to do that?" Mara asked. "My mother, before she left." "She teach you anything else?" "How to be quiet, how to hide, how to make myself small." Lark's needle paused. "But I don't want to be small anymore." "You're not." "I still feel like it sometimes." Mara sat down beside her. "That feeling doesn't go away just because you get bigger, but you learn to carry it different." "How?" "By finding something bigger to fight for." Lark looked at her. "Like this place? Like the people in it?" The girl smiled, small and uncertain, but real. On the third night, they gathered at the edge of the Brenner property. 5 riders in the dark: Mara, Rowan, Eliza, Ben, and Harris. Tom had backed out at the last minute, fear getting the better of him. Mara didn't blame him. They left their horses a mile back and moved in on foot. The canyon was narrow, steep-walled, the trail barely wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. The house sat at the far end, light spilling from the windows. 2 on watch, Eliza whispered, pointing. 1 by the front door, 1 on the roof. "Can you take the one on the roof?" Mara asked. Eliza nodded. She was the best shot among them, steady and cold. "Ben, Harris, you circle around back. Block the rear exit. Rowan and I will go through the front." "What about the ones inside, Mus?" Harris asked. "We handle them." "How?" "Fast." They split up. Mara and Rowan moved along the western wall, staying low, using the shadows. The man by the front door was young, barely 20, leaning against the frame with a rifle across his lap. He looked bored. Mara pulled her knife. Rowan grabbed her wrist. "Let me," he whispered. "You're not—" "I am." She hesitated, then nodded. Rowan moved forward, silent as smoke. When he was 5 feet away, the guard's head snapped up. Too late. Rowan hit him hard across the temple with the butt of his rifle. The man went down without a sound. Mara dragged him into the shadows and tied his hands. A shot rang out from the roof. Eliza's work. The man up top tumbled and hit the ground with a heavy thud. "Move!" Mara hissed. They burst through the front door. 4 men inside, sitting around a table, cards spread between them. One reached for his gun. Mara shot him in the shoulder. He screamed and went down. "Don't move," she said, her voice hard as iron. The other 3 froze. One was the scarred man from before. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed by something darker. "You made a mistake coming here," he said. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing." Rowan moved to the side, keeping his rifle trained on them. Ben and Harris came through the back door, their faces grim. "Anyone else in the house?" Mara asked. "Just us," the scarred man said. "You're lying. Check for yourself." Harris moved through the rooms quickly, then came back shaking his head. "Empty." Mara stepped closer to the table. "Here's how this works. You're going to take a message back to Garrick. Tell him we're done playing defense. Tell him if he comes after us again, we come after him, and we won't stop until he's gone." The scarred man laughed. "You think Garrick's scared of you? You just signed your own death warrant." "Maybe, but you're the one on your knees." She turned to leave, then stopped. Something didn't feel right. The man she'd shot was clutching his shoulder, but his eyes weren't on her. They were on the back corner of the room. "Rowan, down!" She dove sideways as gunfire erupted from the shadows. A man she hadn't seen, hidden behind a stacked crate, came out firing. Rowan hit the floor, returning fire. Mara rolled, came up shooting. The man took 2 bullets to the chest and dropped. But the damage was done. One of Garrick's men at the table had grabbed a gun. He fired wild, panicked. The bullet caught Harris in the leg. The old man went down hard, yelling. Ben shot the man dead center. He fell across the table, scattering cards. "Harris?" Eliza was at his side, pressing her hand to the wound. Blood poured between her fingers. "I'm all right," Harris gasped. "Just get me out of here." Mara grabbed the scarred man by his collar and hauled him up. "Tell Garrick what I said. You've got one chance." She shoved him toward the door. He stumbled, caught himself, then ran. They got Harris outside, Ben and Rowan carrying him between them. Eliza tied off the wound as best she could, but it was bad. They needed a doctor. "Closest one's in Ridgewood," Eliza said. "That's 30 miles, Ben said. "He'll never make it." "He will," Mara said, "because we're not losing anyone tonight." They moved fast, getting back to their horses, riding hard through the dark. Harris stayed conscious, teeth gritted against the pain, one hand clamped over the wound. They reached Ridgewood just before dawn. The doctor, a tired man with kind eyes, took one look at Harris and went to work. 3 hours later, he came out of the back room. "He'll live," he said, "but he won't be walking right for a while." Relief washed through Mara. She slumped against the wall, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. "What happened to him?" the doctor asked. "Hunting accident," Eliza said smoothly. The doctor didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. "He needs rest. Keep the wound clean. Change the bandages twice a day." "We will." They stayed in Ridgewood long enough to make sure Harris was stable, then rode back to Dry Hollow. The sun was high by the time they reached the valley. Mara expected to feel victorious. They'd struck back, made Garrick's men bleed. Instead, she felt hollow. Rowan must have seen it on her face. "You all right? I killed a man tonight." "He would have killed you." "I know, but that doesn't make it easier." "It's not supposed to." They rode in silence after that. When they reached the ranch, Lark was waiting on the porch, her face tight with worry. She ran to Mara the moment she dismounted. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine." "What happened?" "We sent a message." "Did they listen?" "We're about to find out." 2 days passed, then 3. No attacks, no riders, nothing. Mara knew it wouldn't last. Garrick wasn't the type to let something like this slide. He'd be planning something bigger, something worse. On the 4th day, a rider came to the ranch. Not one of Garrick's men. Someone Mara didn't recognize. She met him at the property line, rifle in hand. "I've got a message," the rider said. He didn't look happy about it. "From who?" "Garrick. He wants to meet him." "Where?" "Dry Hollow, tomorrow noon, Main Street." "He thinks I'm stupid enough to walk into the middle of town?" "He said to tell you he'll come alone. No men, no guns. Just talk." Mara laughed bitterly. "And I'm supposed to believe that?" The rider shrugged. "I'm just delivering the message." He turned his horse and rode off. Mara watched him go, her mind racing. Rowan came up beside her. "It's a trap." Probably. So you're not going. I didn't say that. Mara, if he wants to talk, I'll talk, but I'm not going alone. That night, she gathered everyone again. Eliza, Ben, Harris, still recovering but insisting on being involved, and Rowan. He's trying to draw you out, Eliza said. Get you into the open where his men can finish you. I know. Then don't go. If I don't, he'll see it as weakness, and we can't afford that. So what's the play? Ben asked. Mara spread the map on the table. I go into town, meet him in the street, but the rest of you are positioned around the perimeter, rooftops, alleys, anywhere you can see the street. If his men show up, you take them out. And if it's really just him, Harris asked, then I find out what he wants. And maybe we end this without more blood. You really think he's going to negotiate? No, but I have to try. Rowan grabbed her arm. You're putting yourself in the line of fire. I've been in the line of fire since I got here. This is different. How? Because this time he knows you're coming. Mara looked at him, at the fear in his eyes, and something in her chest twisted. I'll be careful. Careful doesn't mean safe. Nothing about this is safe. You know that. He let go of her arm, his jaw tight. Fine, but I'm going with you. Rowan, I'm going. That's not a discussion. She wanted to argue, but the look on his face told her it wouldn't matter. All right, she said, but you stay back. If things go bad, you get out. Same goes for you. The next day, they rode into Dry Hollow just before noon. The town was quiet, the streets empty. Too empty. Mara dismounted and walked into the center of the street. Rowan stayed back, near the saloon, his rifle hidden, but ready. She waited. A minute passed. Then 2. Then Garrick appeared. He was younger than she'd expected. Maybe 40, well-dressed, with sharp eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. He walked down the street like he owned it, hands in his pockets, completely at ease. You must be Mara Vance, he said, and you're the man trying to steal my land. Steal is a strong word. I prefer acquire. I don't care what you prefer. Garrick stopped 10 feet away. You've caused me a lot of trouble. Good. You killed 2 of my men. They came after me first. That's debatable. No, it's not. He studied her for a long moment. You're tougher than I thought. Most people fold after the first fire. I'm not most people. No, you're not. He tilted his head. Which is why I'm giving you one last chance. Sell me the land. I'll pay fair price. You walk away, no one else gets hurt. And if I say no, then this gets ugly. And I promise you, you won't like how it ends. Mara stepped closer. I've got a counteroffer. You leave us alone. Pack up your men, go back to whoever's paying you, and tell them this valley's not for sale. Garrick laughed. You really think you can win this? I think I can make it expensive enough that you'll wish you'd never started. His smile faded. You're making a mistake. I've made worse. He stared at her, and for a moment something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Then he shrugged. All right then. You want a war? You've got one. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the alley. Mara stood in the empty street, her heart pounding. She knew what came next, and she was ready. Rowan was at her side before Garrick had fully disappeared. That was a mistake, he said. What was I supposed to do? Roll over? You could have taken the money. We could have started somewhere else. Mara turned on him, her voice sharp. There is no somewhere else. There's just here. And if we give up now, we lose everything. If we die, we lose everything anyway. Then we don't die. She walked to her horse and mounted. Rowan followed, his face tight with frustration. They rode out of town in silence, Eliza and Ben falling in behind them from their positions on the rooftops. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was setting. Lark met them at the door, her eyes searching Mara's face. What happened? We're at war. The girl's face went pale. What does that mean? It means they're coming, and when they do, we need to be ready. That night, they fortified the ranch. Rowan boarded up windows, built firing positions behind the fence, stacked sandbags near the house. Mara checked ammunition, cleaned weapons, made sure every rifle and pistol they had was loaded and ready. Lark helped where she could, but mostly she stayed close to Mara, her small hands gripping the edge of Mara's coat like she was afraid she might disappear. "I'm not going anywhere," Mara said quietly. "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I'll fight like hell to stay." The girl nodded, her jaw set in a way that reminded Mara of herself. Eliza and Ben arrived just after dark, their horses tied outside. They'd brought extra ammunition, some dried food, and a determination that showed in the set of their shoulders. "Harris is staying at his place," Eliza said. "He's got his sons watching the property. If Garrick's men come through there, they'll send word." "Good," Mara said. "What about Sarah and Tom?" "Sarah's locked herself in. Won't come out. Won't help. Tom's the same. Can't say I blame them." "I can," Ben said. "We're all in this valley together. Hiding doesn't change that." "Maybe not, but not everyone's built for this kind of fight." They gathered around the table, the same map spread out before them. Mara had marked the approach routes, the vulnerable spots, the places where Garrick's men were most likely to hit. "They'll come at night," she said, "probably split into groups, hit us from multiple sides, overwhelm us before we can respond." "How many do you think he'll bring?" Ben asked. "All of them. This isn't a warning anymore. This is the end." Rowan leaned forward. "Then we need to make sure it's their end, not ours." "We can't hold them off if they come in force," Eliza said. "There's only 5 of us, maybe 6 if we count Lark." "We're not counting Lark," Mara said sharply. "She knows how to shoot. She's a child." "So were we once. And we learned fast when we had to." Mara looked across the room to where Lark sat, her small frame hunched in the corner. The girl was watching them, her eyes dark and serious. "No," Mara said. "She stays out of this." "She's already in it," Eliza said quietly. "Whether you like it or not." Mara wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Eliza was right. Lark was part of this now, had been from the moment Mara pulled her out of that barn. There was no protecting her from what was coming, but that didn't mean Mara had to like it. They worked through the night, setting up defenses, planning fallback positions, making sure everyone knew their role. By the time the first light crept over the horizon, they were as ready as they'd ever be. "Get some sleep," Mara said. "We don't know when they're coming, but it won't be long." Eliza and Ben bedded down in the barn. Rowan stretched out on the floor of the main room. Lark curled up near the stove, wrapped in blankets. Mara sat by the window, rifle across her lap, watching the empty land beyond. She didn't sleep, couldn't. Every sound made her fingers tighten on the rifle. Every shadow made her heart race. Rowan's voice came from behind her. "You should rest." "I'm fine." "You're exhausted." "So are you." He crossed the room and sat down beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. "When this is over," Rowan said quietly, "if we make it through, we will. If we do," he continued, "I want you to know something." Mara looked at him. His face was half in shadow, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped his knees. "What?" "This place," he said. "It was dying before you got here. Hell, I was dying, and then you showed up and everything changed. You changed it." "I just did what needed doing." "No. You did more than that. You made me believe we could win, that we could build something worth keeping." Mara felt something tighten in her chest. "Rowan, I'm not good with words, never have been, but I need you to know that whatever happens, you gave me something I thought I'd lost. Hope." She reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. "We're going to make it through this," she said. "All of us." "How do you know?" "Because we don't have any other choice." He smiled, small and tired, and squeezed her hand. They sat like that until the sun was fully up, watching the land come alive in the morning light. Then they stood, checked their weapons, and waited. The attack came 3 nights later. Mara woke to the smell of smoke. She was on her feet instantly, grabbing her rifle, shouting for Rowan. He was already moving, shaking Eliza and Ben awake in the barn. Outside, the fence was on fire. Not just one section, the entire western perimeter. Flames climbed into the night sky, casting wild shadows across the yard. "They're here," Mara said. Gunfire erupted from the darkness. Bullets tore into the house, shattering what was left of the windows, splintering wood. Mara dropped to the floor, pulling Lark down with her. "Stay low," she said. Don't move unless I tell you to. Lark nodded, her face white with fear. Mara crawled to the window and looked out. She could see shapes moving in the darkness, at least 6 of them, maybe more. They were advancing on the house, using the smoke as cover. Rowan appeared beside her, his rifle ready. How many? Too many. We can't hold them off from inside. I know. She turned to Eliza and Ben, who'd taken positions by the other windows. We need to split them up, drive them back. How? Ben asked. We go out there. That's suicide. So is sitting here waiting for them to burn us out. She looked at Rowan. He nodded. All right, Mara said. On my count. 3, 2, 1. They burst through the door, firing as they moved. The men attacking the house scattered, some diving for cover, others returning fire. Mara hit one in the shoulder. He went down screaming. Rowan took out another, a clean shot to the chest. The man crumpled. But there were more. Always more. They fell back to the barn, using the structure for cover. Bullets hammered into the wood, punching holes through the walls. Eliza fired methodically, each shot carefully aimed. Ben was beside her, reloading, his hand shaking but steady enough. We need to get to higher ground, Mara shouted over the gunfire. Where? The barn loft. We can see them from up there. They climbed the ladder, moving fast. From the loft, Mara had a clear view of the yard. She counted 7 men, maybe 8. Too many. But they weren't invincible. She took aim and fired. One man went down, then another. Rowan was beside her, picking off targets with cold precision. Eliza and Ben covered the flanks, keeping the attackers from circling around. For a moment, it felt like they might actually hold them off. Then the barn exploded. Not the whole structure, just the back corner. Someone had thrown dynamite. The blast knocked Mara off her feet, sent her tumbling across the loft. Her ears rang, her vision blurred. She tried to stand and nearly fell through a hole in the floor. Rowan grabbed her arm, hauling her back. We have to get out of here. Smoke was pouring into the loft now, thick and choking. The fire was spreading fast, eating through the old wood like it was made of paper. They climbed down the ladder, coughing, half blind. Eliza and Ben were already on the ground, moving toward the house. Mara followed, her lungs burning. Another explosion. This one closer. The force of it threw her forward, and she hit the ground hard, her rifle skittering out of reach. She looked up and saw one of Garrick's men standing over her, his gun aimed at her head. Should have taken the money, he said. The gunshot was deafening, but it wasn't his gun that fired. The man dropped, a hole in his chest. Behind him, Lark stood with Mara's pistol in her hands, her small frame shaking, but her eyes hard as stone. Mara scrambled to her feet. Lark! I'm not hiding anymore, the girl said. There was no time to argue. Mara grabbed her rifle, and they ran for the house. Inside, it was chaos. The walls were riddled with bullet holes, the furniture overturned. Rowan was at the window, firing at shapes in the smoke. They're pulling back, he said. Mara looked out. He was right. The attackers were retreating, dragging their wounded with them. Within minutes, they were gone, swallowed by the darkness. The silence that followed was deafening. Mara slumped against the wall, her whole body shaking. Lark sat down beside her, the pistol still in her hands. The girl's face was streaked with soot and tears. You shouldn't have done that, Mara said quietly. He was going to kill you. I know. But you're 11 years old. You shouldn't have to. I'm 12, and I did what I had to. Mara looked at her, this fierce, broken child who'd just saved her life. She reached out and pulled Lark into her arms, holding her tight. Thank you, she whispered. Lark didn't answer. She just held on. Outside, the barn was still burning. Rowan and Ben were trying to put it out, but it was too far gone. By the time the flames died, half the structure was gone. Eliza came inside, her face grim. We lost 2 horses. The rest ran off. What about the house? Structurally sound, but it's a mess. Mara nodded. She felt numb, hollowed out. They'd survived, but just barely. They'll come back, Ben said. I know. And next time they'll bring more men. I know. Rowan crossed the room and knelt beside her. We can't keep doing this. We're outnumbered, outgunned. If we stay here, we die. Then we don't stay here. He frowned. What are you saying? I'm saying we take the fight to them. We find where they're holed up and we end this. That's insane. Probably, but it's the only way we survive. Eliza looked at her. You know where they are? I've got an idea. There's a canyon about 10 miles north. It's where they were camped before. If they're regrouping, that's where they'll be. And you want to go after them? Yes. When? Tonight, before they have a chance to come back. Ben shook his head. We're exhausted. We've got wounded. We can barely stand. Which is exactly why they won't expect it. The room went quiet. Mara looked around at the faces staring back at her. Rowan, Eliza, Ben, Lark. All of them scared, all of them exhausted, all of them still standing. I'm not asking you to come, she said. This is my fight. But if you're with me, we do this together, and we finish it. Rowan stood. I'm in. Eliza nodded. Me too. Ben hesitated, then sighed. All right, but if we die, I'm blaming you. Mara almost smiled. Fair enough. Lark stood up. I'm coming too. No. Yes. Lark, I saved your life tonight. That means I get a say. And I say I'm coming. Mara wanted to argue, but the look in the girl's eyes stopped her. This wasn't a child anymore. This was someone who'd crossed a line and couldn't go back. All right, Mara said quietly, but you stay close to me. Understand? Lark nodded. They spent the next few hours preparing, gathered what weapons they had left, what ammunition they could spare. Wrapped wounds, ate what little food remained, tried to rest. Mara found Rowan outside, staring at the burned remains of the barn. You think this'll work? He asked. I don't know. Then why are we doing it? Because it's better than sitting here waiting to die. He turned to look at her. You know, if we do this, there's no going back. We're crossing a line. We crossed that line the moment we decided to fight. This is different. This is us going after them, hunting them. Yes. And you're all right with that? Mara thought about it, about the life she'd lived before this place, always running, always looking over her shoulder, about the life she'd found here, hard, brutal, but hers. Yes, she said. I am. They left just before midnight. 5 riders moving through the darkness, Mara, Rowan, Eliza, Ben, and Lark. The girl sat in front of Mara on the horse, small and silent. The canyon was exactly where Mara remembered it. A narrow cut in the earth, steep walls rising on either side, a single trail leading in. At the far end, she could see firelight. They left the horses a quarter-mile back and moved in on foot. The camp was small, 3 tents, a fire, and 6 men sleeping around it. Not all of Garrick's crew, but enough. Mara signaled the others. They spread out, taking positions around the perimeter. She waited until everyone was in place, then raised her hand. 3, 2, 1. They opened fire. The camp erupted into chaos. Men scrambled for weapons, shouting, firing blind into the darkness. Mara's first shot took one down. Her second missed. Her third hit a man in the leg and he went down screaming. Rowan was beside her, firing methodically. Eliza and Ben covered the flanks. Lark stayed behind a rock, her pistol ready but not firing. One of Garrick's men made a run for it, heading for the trail. Ben cut him down. Another tried to flank them, but Eliza was ready. Her shot took him in the chest. In less than 2 minutes, it was over. 6 men down. The camp silent except for the crackle of the dying fire. Mara walked through the wreckage, checking bodies. One man was still alive, clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. It was the scarred man from before. He looked up at her, his face twisted with pain and rage. You're a dead woman, he gasped. Not tonight. Garrick will hunt you down. He'll tell him to come find me. She turned and walked away, leaving him there. They searched the camp quickly, looking for anything useful. Mara found a ledger in one of the tents. Names, properties, payments, evidence of everything Garrick had done. This is it, she said, holding it up. This proves he's been running people off their land. Will anyone care? Rowan asked. I don't know, but it's something. They took the ledger, the weapons, what little supplies they could carry, and left. By the time they reached their horses, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. They rode back to the ranch in silence, exhausted and covered in blood. When they arrived, the house was still standing, battered but intact. Mara dismounted and looked around. The barn was gone. The fence was half burned. The land was scarred with bullet holes and fire. But they were alive. And Garrick's men weren't. Eliza put a hand on her shoulder. You did it. We did it. What now? Mara looked at the ledger in her hands. Now we finish this. The next morning, Mara rode into Dry Hollow alone. She tied her horse outside the sheriff's office and walked inside. The sheriff looked up from his desk, his expression souring the moment he saw her. "You've got nerve coming here," he said. "I've got evidence." She dropped the ledger on his desk. "Everything Garrick's done, names, dates, payments, it's all there." The sheriff didn't touch it. So? "So you're going to arrest him?" He laughed. "The hell I am. You're the law. This is proof of extortion, arson, murder, and you're a woman who just killed 6 men. You think I'm going to take your word for anything?" Mara leaned across the desk. "Those men attacked my property. I defended it. That's not murder. That's survival." "That's your story. Garrick will have a different one." "Then let him tell it, in court, with this ledger as evidence." The sheriff stood, his hand moving to his gun. "Get out of my office." "Not until you do your job." "I said get out." Mara didn't move. She stared at him, her eyes hard. "You're on his payroll, I get it, but eventually people are going to figure out what you are, and when they do, you'll have more than me to worry about." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." She turned and walked out, leaving the ledger on his desk. Outside, Rowan was waiting. "He's not going to do anything," Mara said. "Then what do we do?" She looked down the street at the empty buildings, the shuttered windows, the people too scared to show their faces. "We make sure everyone knows what Garrick is, and we make sure they know we're not backing down." Over the next week, Mara spread the word. She talked to shopkeepers, ranchers, anyone who would listen. She showed them copies of the ledger, told them what Garrick had done, what he was planning to do. Some listened. Most didn't. But slowly, carefully, things started to shift. People started talking. Questions were asked. Garrick's name became something whispered in back rooms instead of spoken openly. And then, one morning, he was gone. No warning, no final confrontation, just gone. His men packed up and left in the middle of the night, taking everything with them. By the time anyone noticed, they were already miles away. Mara stood on the porch of the ranch, staring at the empty road, trying to process what had happened. "You think he'll come back?" Rowan asked. "I don't know. But we won." "Maybe." She didn't feel like they'd won. She felt like they'd survived. And survival wasn't the same thing as victory. But it was enough. For now, it was enough. The silence that followed Garrick's departure was unsettling. Mara kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for riders to appear on the horizon, for another fire in the night. But days passed, then weeks, and nothing happened. The valley held its breath. Rowan spent those early weeks rebuilding the barn. Mara helped when she could, but mostly she watched the road. Old habits died hard. She'd spent too many years running to believe safety could last. Lark had changed in ways that made Mara's chest ache. The girl moved differently now, shoulders back, head up, eyes always scanning. She'd stopped flinching at loud noises, stopped hiding when strangers appeared. Instead, she stood beside Mara, hand resting on the pistol she now carried in a holster Rowan had made for her. "You don't have to wear that all the time," Mara said one morning. "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Because I'm not going back to being the girl who hides." Mara understood that. She understood it too well. They were working on the fence when Eliza rode up, her face troubled. "There's talk in town," she said, dismounting. "What kind of talk?" "About Garrick, about what happened at the canyon." Eliza glanced at Lark, then back to Mara. "People are saying you murdered those men in cold blood." "We defended ourselves." "That's not how they're telling it. They're saying you ambushed them, killed them while they slept." Mara's jaw tightened. "They came after us first, burned our property, killed our livestock." "I know, but that doesn't matter to people who want to believe the worst." Eliza paused. "The sheriff's talking about bringing charges." "Let him try." "Mara, I'm serious. If he arrests you, he won't. He's too deep in Garrick's pocket to risk drawing attention to any of this. Unless Garrick's people pressure him. Unless they want revenge." Mara looked out at the land, at the fence she'd rebuilt twice now, at the house that had survived fire and bullets and everything else thrown at it. "Let them come," she said. "We'll be ready." But Eliza's warning stayed with her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat at the table, cleaning her rifle for the third time, her mind churning. Rowan came out of the bedroom, his hair mussed from sleep. "You should rest," he said. "Can't." "Because of what Eliza said? Because I don't trust any of this." She set down the rifle. "Garrick doesn't just leave. Men like him don't walk away from unfinished business." "Maybe he decided we weren't worth the trouble. Or maybe he's planning something worse." Rowan sat down across from her. "You can't live like this forever, waiting for the next attack." "Then what am I supposed to do? Pretend everything's fine?" "No, but you could try believing that maybe, just maybe, we actually won." Mara wanted to believe him, but winning had never felt like this, uncertain, fragile, like something that could shatter at any moment. "I don't know how to stop fighting," she said quietly. "Neither do I. But we have to learn. Otherwise, what was the point of all this?" She looked at him, at the exhaustion in his eyes, the scar on his ribs that had healed crooked, the way his hands were calloused from work that never seemed to end. They'd both been worn down to nothing by this place, and somehow they'd survived. "You're right," she said. "I know you're right. I just don't know how to do it. We figure it out together, same way we figured out everything else." He reached across the table and took her hand. She squeezed back, holding on like he was the only solid thing in the world. The next morning, a rider came from Ridgewood, not one of Garrick's men, a messenger carrying a telegram. Mara read it twice, her heart pounding. "What is it?" Rowan asked. "It's from a law office in Denver. They're looking into Garrick's operation. Want me to testify about what happened here." "Are you going to?" "I don't know. That ledger you gave the sheriff, someone must have sent it to them." Mara thought about that. The sheriff had been furious when she'd left it on his desk. But maybe someone else had seen it. Maybe someone had cared enough to do something. "If I testify," she said slowly, "it means going to Denver, being gone for weeks, maybe months." So? "So I can't leave this place undefended." "You wouldn't be. I'd be here. Lark would be here. Eliza and Ben are close enough if we need help. That's not the same as—" "Mara." He stopped her, his voice firm. "You're not the only one who can protect this land. You need to let other people carry some of the weight." She wanted to argue, but the look on his face told her he was right. "I'll think about it," she said. That afternoon, she walked the property alone. The land was scarred, burned patches where grass used to grow, fence posts still blackened from fire, the barn half its original size. But it was also healing. New grass was coming in. The creek still ran clear. The sky was the same impossible blue it had always been. She found Lark sitting on a rock near the water, throwing stones. "Can I sit?" Mara asked. The girl nodded. Mara sat down beside her. "You ever think about leaving?" Mara asked. Lark stopped mid-throw. "Why would I?" "Because this place is hard. Because what we went through, what you went through, no one should have to live like that." "Where would I go?" "Somewhere safer, somewhere you could just be a kid." Lark turned to look at her, and there was something ancient in her eyes. "I stopped being a kid the day my parents left me. You didn't make me grow up, Mara. You just gave me a reason to survive." Mara felt her throat tighten. "You deserve more than survival. So do you. But we take what we can get, right?" The girl turned back to the water and threw another stone. It skipped 3 times before sinking. "I'm not leaving," Lark said. "This is home, broken or not." "Yeah," Mara said quietly. "It is." 2 days later, Mara made her decision. She would go to Denver, testify, make sure Garrick and whoever was backing him faced consequences. But first, she needed to make sure the ranch would survive without her. She spent the next week teaching Lark everything she knew: how to check the fence line, how to manage the water supply, how to spot trouble before it arrived. The girl absorbed it all, her face serious, her questions sharp. Rowan reinforced the doors and windows, built new firing positions, stocked ammunition in hidden caches around the property. He moved like a man preparing for war, even though the war was supposedly over. "You don't think they'll come back?" Mara said, watching him work. "No, but I'm not taking chances." "Good." Eliza and Ben came by the day before Mara was set to leave. They brought supplies, extra ammunition, a promise to check on the ranch every few days. "How long will you be gone?" Eliza asked. as long as it takes. And if Garrick's people come after you in Denver, then I deal with it there. Eliza studied her. You've changed since you got here. So has everyone. No, you especially. You came here looking for a place to belong. Now you're leaving to fight for it. That's different. Mara thought about that. Maybe, but this place is worth fighting for. These people are worth fighting for. Just make sure you come back. I will. That night, Mara packed what little she'd need. Clothes, the ledger she'd copied from the original, her mother's old locket that she'd carried through every broken town and failed promise. She left her rifle with Rowan, her pistol with Lark. I don't need this, Lark protested. Yes, you do. You're the best shot we have. The girl's eyes widened. Really? Really? Lark looked down at the pistol in her hands, then back at Mara. I'll keep it safe. I know you will. Rowan walked Mara outside. The stars were bright overhead, the air cool and clean. You scared? He asked. Terrified. Good. Means you're smart. She turned to face him. If something happens, if they come back while I'm gone, we'll handle it. Rowan, I mean it. You've taught us how to fight, how to survive. We'll be fine. She wanted to believe him, but leaving felt like tearing off a piece of herself. This place, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's the first thing I've ever had that felt like mine. Ours, he corrected. Ours, she agreed. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the scar on his jaw she'd never asked about, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. Come back, he said. I will. He kissed her then, quick and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the shape of her. She kissed him back, her hands gripping his shirt, holding on. When they pulled apart, both of them were shaking. Don't die while I'm gone, she said. Same to you. She left at first light. The stage to Ridgewood, then the train to Denver. 3 weeks of travel. 3 weeks of looking over her shoulder. 3 weeks of wondering if she'd made the right choice. Denver was bigger than any place she'd ever been. Buildings stacked on top of each other, streets crowded with people who moved like they had somewhere important to be. The noise was overwhelming. Horses, carriages, voices shouting over each other. The law office was in a tall brick building downtown. Mara climbed 3 flights of stairs and found herself in a room full of papers and serious-faced men. The lawyer who'd sent the telegram was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, with wire-rimmed glasses and an earnest face. Miss Vance, he said, standing to shake her hand. Thank you for coming. You said you're investigating Garrick. We are, along with several other land acquisition operations across the territory. Your ledger was the first solid evidence we've had. How did you get it? Someone at the Dry Hollow Sheriff's Office sent it anonymously. We believe it was one of the deputies who disagreed with the sheriff's arrangement with Garrick. Mara filed that information away. Someone in that town had a conscience after all. What do you need from me? She asked. Your testimony. Details about what happened on your property, what Garrick's men did, how the attacks escalated. We're building a case not just against Garrick, but against the people funding him. Who's funding him? The lawyer hesitated. A consortium of investors from back east. They've been buying up land across the frontier, trying to control water rights, mineral deposits, anything valuable. Garrick was just the local enforcer. And if I testify, what happens to him? If we can make the charges stick, prison. Maybe worse. Good. The trial took 6 weeks. Mara testified 3 times, recounting every attack, every threat, every moment of violence. The defense tried to paint her as a vigilante, a murderer hiding behind self-defense. But the ledger was damning, and other witnesses came forward. People Garrick had run off their land, families destroyed by his tactics. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Guilty on all counts. Garrick was sentenced to 15 years. His backers scattered, their operation dismantled. The land they'd stolen was returned to its original owners, or sold to people who'd actually work it. When it was over, the lawyer shook Mara's hand again. You did a brave thing, he said. I did what I had to. Still, not many people would have fought back the way you did. Mara thought about Rowan, about Lark, about the ranch waiting for her in that dusty valley. I had something worth fighting for, she said. The journey back felt longer than the journey out. Every mile, Mara's anxiety grew. What if she came back to ashes? What if Garrick's people had retaliated while she was gone? What if Rowan was dead? Lark was gone. Everything she'd built had crumbled. But when the stage finally rolled into Dry Hollow, the town looked the same, tired, wary, but standing. She hired a horse from the livery and rode out to the ranch. The first thing she saw was the fence. Not burned, not broken. Standing. Then the barn. Rebuilt, bigger than before, with a new roof that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Then Rowan, standing in the yard, hammer in hand, looking up as she rode in. He dropped the hammer and started walking toward her. Then he was running. Mara dismounted and ran to meet him. They collided in the middle of the yard, his arms wrapping around her, lifting her off the ground. "You're back," he said, his voice rough. "I'm back." "For good?" "For good." He set her down but didn't let go. She looked up at him, at the relief in his eyes, the way he was holding her like she might disappear. "We won," she said. "Garrick's in prison. His backers are gone. It's over." "I know. Word reached us 2 weeks ago. And you rebuilt anyway." "Of course. This is home." Lark came running out of the house, shouting Mara's name. She threw herself at Mara with enough force to nearly knock her over. Mara caught her, holding tight. "I missed you," Lark said, her voice muffled against Mara's coat. "I missed you too." "Did you really testify in front of a whole courtroom?" "I did." "Were you scared?" "Terrified." "But you did it anyway." "Yeah, I did it anyway." That night they sat around the table, Mara, Rowan, and Lark, and talked. About Denver, about the trial, about everything that had happened while Mara was gone. Eliza and Ben had stopped by twice a week. Harris had sent supplies. Even Sarah and Tom had come around, offering help now that the danger had passed. "The valley's different now," Rowan said. "People are talking to each other, working together. It's like everyone finally realized we're stronger united than divided." "Took them long enough," Mara said. "Better late than never." She looked around the house. It was cleaner than when she'd left, with new curtains on the windows and a rug on the floor. Little touches that spoke of care, of someone trying to make a house into a home. "You did all this?" she asked. Rowan shrugged. "Had to keep busy, and I figured if you were coming back, you deserved to come back to something worth keeping." Mara felt something warm settle in her chest. "It's perfect." "It's not, but it's ours." "Yeah," she said, "it is." The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm Mara had never experienced before. Work during the day, fixing what still needed fixing, planting crops, tending livestock. Quiet evenings around the table, talking or reading or just sitting in comfortable silence. Nights where she actually slept, secure in the knowledge that no one was coming to burn them out. Lark thrived. She helped with everything, her small hands quick and capable. She learned to read using old newspapers Eliza brought from town. She started smiling more, laughing even, the sound bright and unexpected. One afternoon, Mara found her by the creek, building something out of stones and sticks. "What's that?" Mara asked. "A house, for when I'm older." "You planning on staying?" Lark looked up at her, surprised. "Of course. Where else would I go?" "I don't know. Somewhere you could have a real future." "This is a real future. It's my future." Mara crouched down beside her. "You know you could leave, right? If you wanted to go to school, learn a trade, see the world, I'd help you. We'd help you." "I know." Lark placed another stone carefully. "But I don't want to leave. This place, you and Rowan, this is my family. I'm not giving that up." Mara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. "All right then. But when you're older, if you change your mind—" "I won't." The girl said it with such certainty that Mara couldn't help but believe her. Months passed. The land healed, green returning to the burned patches, the creek running strong through the spring thaw. The ranch grew, more livestock, better crops, a second barn for storage. Other ranchers started coming by, asking for advice, trading supplies, building the kind of community that had never existed before. Mara and Rowan worked side by side, their partnership settling into something deeper, something neither of them had words for but both understood. They didn't talk about the future in grand terms. They just lived it, one day at a time, building something that would last. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Rowan found Mara sitting on the porch. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing." He sat down beside her. "That's specific." She smiled. "I was thinking about when I first got here, how broken everything was, how I almost left." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." She looked at him. "Do you ever regret it? Writing that letter?" "Not once." "Even after everything we went through?" "Especially after everything we went through." He reached over and took her hand. "You gave me something I thought I'd lost, a reason to keep fighting. You gave me the same thing." They sat like that until the stars came out, watching the land settle into night. A year after Garrick's conviction, Mara stood in the same spot where she'd first arrived. The ranch looked nothing like it had that day. The house was solid, painted, with a garden out front that Lark tended obsessively. The barn stood tall and proud. The fence ran straight and true all the way to the property line. But more than the physical changes, something else had shifted. The tension that had lived in Mara's shoulders for as long as she could remember had eased. She woke up without immediately reaching for a weapon. She went to bed without checking the locks 3 times. She'd learned to live instead of just survive. Rowan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you doing out here?" he asked. "Remembering?" "Remembering what?" "The day I got here. How lost I was. How scared." "You didn't seem scared." "I was terrified. I thought I'd made the biggest mistake of my life." "And now?" She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "Now I know I made the best decision I ever made." He kissed her, slow and sweet, and she kissed him back, grateful for every hard choice that had led her here. Inside the house, Lark was setting the table for dinner. She moved with confidence now, no hesitation, no fear. Just a girl at home in the life she'd chosen. When they came inside, she looked up and smiled. "Food's ready," she said. They sat down together, the 3 of them, and ate. They talked about plans for the coming season, about the new calf that had been born that morning, about a letter Eliza had received from her sister in California. Normal things, ordinary things, the kind of things Mara had never thought she'd have. After dinner, Lark went to bed and Mara and Rowan sat by the fire. The house was quiet, peaceful, the kind of quiet that came from safety rather than fear. "You ever think about what comes next?" Rowan asked. "Sometimes." "And?" "And I think we just keep building, keep making this place stronger, keep proving that people like us, people who've been pushed around and beaten down, we can win, we can thrive." "That's a nice thought." "It's more than a thought. It's what we've already done." He looked at her, firelight dancing across his face. "You really believe that?" "I do. Because we didn't just survive, Rowan. We fought for something bigger than ourselves. We fought for the right to exist on our own terms. And we won." "We did," he said quietly. "We really did." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the grass, carrying the scent of rain. Mara stood and went to the window, looking out at the dark land beyond. Somewhere out there, other people were fighting the same fight, struggling to hold on to what was theirs, battling against forces that wanted to take it away. Some would win, some would lose. But the important thing was that they were fighting. Because the world didn't give you anything. You had to take it. You had to build it. You had to fight for every inch and refuse to back down. That was what Mara had learned. That was what this place had taught her. She'd arrived here broken, running from a life that had beaten her down more times than she could count. She'd found a man barely holding on, a piece of land falling apart, a future that looked impossible. And she'd chosen to stay. She'd chosen to fight. She'd chosen to build something out of nothing, and in doing so, she'd become something she'd never been before. Not just a survivor, not just a fighter, someone who belonged. Rowan came up behind her again, his presence solid and warm. "Come to bed," he said. "In a minute." "Mara, I just need a minute." He kissed the top of her head and left her there. Mara stood alone in the darkness, looking out at the land she'd fought for, the life she'd built, the future she'd carved out of nothing but determination and blood and stubborn refusal to quit. She thought about all the women like her, the ones who'd been told they were too weak, too soft, too much, or not enough, the ones who'd been pushed aside, overlooked, underestimated. She thought about what she'd learned fighting for this place. That strength wasn't about being fearless. It was about being terrified and doing it anyway. That family wasn't just blood. It was the people who stood beside you when everything was burning. That home wasn't a place you found. It was a place you made brick by brick, day by day, through every battle and every small victory. She thought about Lark, asleep in the next room, safe and fed and loved. About the girl she'd been, hiding in a barn, starving and alone. About the woman she'd become. She thought about Rowan, waiting for her in bed, scarred and steady and hers. She thought about herself. About the woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach with nothing but a trunk and a half-broken promise. About everything she'd become. And she smiled, because she'd done it. She'd survived the wild, the violence, the fear. She'd faced down men who'd tried to break her and refused to bend. She'd built something lasting out of dust and determination. She'd become exactly who she'd needed to be, and she'd done it on her own terms. Mara Vance turned away from the window and walked to the bedroom. She climbed into bed beside Rowan, who pulled her close without waking. She closed her eyes, listening to the sound of his breathing, the crackle of the dying fire, the wind moving through the valley, and for the first time in her life she felt at peace, because she'd found what she'd been looking for all along, not safety, not comfort, not an easy life, but a purpose, a place, a people worth fighting for. And that, she'd learned, was worth more than anything else in the world. The frontier was hard. It took everything you had and demanded more. It broke the weak and tested the strong. It offered no promises and gave no second chances. But for those who refused to break, for those who stood their ground and fought back, for those who built something out of nothing and defended it with everything they had, for them, the frontier offered something rare and precious, the chance to become who they were always meant to be. Mara had taken that chance, and she'd never looked back.